trust that would be prepared by the attorney for the individual.
Okay.
So that's really a key. Some of the other documents that would be part of a set, somebody's going to an experienced estate planning attorney, would be a will, which is a little bit of a catch-all for the assets that are not correctly titled in the trust. Then a will, usually called a pour-over will, would put those assets into the trust. So every once in a while we come across assets that are held in the name of the individual, such as an automobile, something like that, which we can transfer under the pour-over will over into the trust. Fairly rudimentary. But probably the most complex document we have would be what's called durable power of attorney for healthcare, or an advance directive. That's the healthcare decision-making document. That will set out very, very specifically, and again, coming back to the question, what should you be doing when you look at taking on the role as a trustee or an agent. The durable power of attorney will set out the guidelines, or the advance directive will set out the guidelines for the person's care. So that will tell you their final wishes, whether they want heroic measures, whether they want CPR, that type of thing. So this is really, really a big deal. To some degree, the assets can take care of themselves. You can pay the bills, buy the groceries, but when it comes to the healthcare decision making, your advance directive, power of attorney for healthcare, that really is a huge document. And so sometimes we look at those documents to implement those.
Okay. Now, how can a professional fiduciary help an individual with failing health or the family of that individual?
The failing health is usually when we get called in.
Okay.
When mom and dad are hale and hearty, they can manage their own affairs. In fact, they'll get very resentful if you try to step in and help them. So you really don't want to do that. So, but when the time comes, there are many things. There can be cognitive impairment, so the decision making isn't as good. Can be eyesight decline, hearing decline, any of those things. So the professional fiduciary is unusually skilled, I'd say, in assessing, when help should be brought in. Sometimes, honestly, with you, Mike, it's a little bit of a battle getting the help put into place, but usually it allows the elder to relax a little bit. They're not getting the red notices from the Pacific Gas and Electric Company. They're not getting liens put on their property for their garbage bill. That's taken out of their hands, so the bills would come directly into the professional fiduciary's office, so life becomes a little bit easier. They don't have the calls from the stockbroker saying, buy this, sell that, that sort of thing, because if the professional fiduciary is involved, those calls would go to the professional fiduciary to continue the management of the finances. But again, we're coming back to the failing health issue. If there is an advance directive for the healthcare issues, huge issue is, should there be a move away from the residence into a care facility?
Yes.
So obviously I would bring in additional resources, not only the person's primary care physician, but maybe what I call a case manager, somebody who's skilled in elder care issues, to point out the benefits of maybe a relocation, and if it's not a relocation, to bring resources into the home to care for the elder in their own home. So we're constantly trying to bridge that gap. Sometimes we're successful, sometimes we fail, we just can't do it. So I'm not going to say it's a 100% success rate, Mike.
Oh, darn. Okay. What kind of oversight is there for the activities of professional fiduciary?
Well, as we've referred to before, there's the Department of Consumer Affairs, which is our licensing body. So the Department of Consumer Affairs will look after the licensing. It's a fairly rigid licensing. I'm not sure what it's like for a CPA, but for a licensed fiduciary, it's an annual license renewal with a $700 annual fee, which I think is one of the highest.
Yeah.
So obviously that is something that the fiduciaries will pay attention to. And as part of the renewal process, the fiduciary has to set out any cases in which there is any action being taken against them, any missing funds, or any litigation that's been filed against them. And then the Bureau has the ability to investigate that to see whether the license should be renewed or not renewed. So the Licensing Bureau has quite a bit of authority. In addition to that, the California Department of Consumer Affairs, we have our own Professional Fiduciary Association, which you mentioned before, I've been quite involved with, and that also has an ethics committee. So if a consumer, a family member, or indeed the elder themselves feel that the fiduciary is not doing their job, they could file an ethics complaint with the Professional Fiduciary Association and have an investigation run. So there is some recourse. In terms of the day-to-day oversight, a lot of what I try to do, particularly on the financial end, is to send reports out to what I'll broadly call competent parties. So if mom and dad don't have the capacity, maybe their eyesight's very poor, or their cognitive abilities are not that great, typically I'll send reports out to appropriate family members. So we try to keep people informed. Some of the cases I get involved with, there is no family. People never married, never had any children, there's just nobody around. So we try to bring the attorney for the elder into play, send regular reports out to the attorney, and rely on the attorney to do any enforcement as well. So that really is one of the areas I think that's absolutely critical. What are the checks and balances? So in my business, I'm very aware of people looking over my shoulder, and in fact I encourage it.
Okay. So we talked about these two bodies, but maybe you can go into a little bit of detail. What are the roles of the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Professional Fiduciaries Association of California? So how do you interface with these, and what are their roles for you?
Basically, I can't run my business without my license. So
Okay.
the Department of Consumer Affairs would have to come first in anything that I was doing. I've got
Okay.
to make sure that I'm filling in the correct forms, sending in the correct amount of money, and behaving myself so far as the state of California is concerned.
Uh-huh.
The backup to that, though, the Professional Fiduciary Association, I believe, is absolutely essential. As I believe in your profession, you have a number of bodies that you can belong to on a voluntary basis.
Right.
Over and above the standard amount of education that's required to continue your license, there are a tremendous number of classes that you can use to enhance your business and your level of expertise. So that's really where the Professional Fiduciary Association comes in. We're currently running 2 educational conferences a year. There are different chapter meetings. We bring in experts in accounting issues, investment issues, real estate issues, personal care issues. So the Professional Fiduciary Association really provides a tremendous education boost to the professional fiduciary. In addition to that, we're a great resource for the newer fiduciaries to try to bring them along, provide some mentoring services, tell them how the more experienced fiduciaries run their business. And this, as I mentioned before, is something that's quite unusual in a profession. Very often in a profession you're very protective, you don't let other people look at your office and that type of thing, but the professional fiduciaries generally as a group are very accepting of new people into their community, and we try to mentor people, bring them along, and encourage them as much as we possibly can.
Okay. So we've got maybe about 45 seconds left. Any final words of wisdom?
Yes, absolutely. And this was a conversation I had with the Humane Society when I was dealing with the director of our local Humane Society office. And she asked, what can people do to make their estate plan fully effective? And my belief on that is do not shortchange yourself on the lawyers that are helping you set up the plan.
Yeah.
That's absolutely a fundamentally great investment.
So you're not a fan of trust mills, I guess.
Some people use them, and if that's what we got to deal with, we'll
Yeah.
deal with them. But absolutely, if you can get a good, solid document, it will absolutely pay dividends if anything goes off the rails later on down the road.
Yeah. Richard, thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate it. I regard Richard as a great resource here in our community, and the professional fiduciaries in general is a great resource. And so we appreciate you being there. And I've had the pleasure of working with Richard and some of the others with some of my clients. So folks, it's good to be aware of these professionals that are here to help you out. And I hope I'll see you next time on Financial Insider Weekly.